Good to have you here. So for everyone watching this live on any of the channels or watching the videos later, this is Slavo from WeWeb, and we will talk about WeWeb right now, which is a low-code front-end tool to build web apps. Slavo will have way better words to describe it, but the content will be about high level, what is WeWeb, when should you use it, who is it for, and then we'll dive into a quick tour of WeWeb, what does it look like, and then specifically, how do you connect fashion to it, and how do you make sure to build like a full product by using WeWeb at the front end and fashion at the back end. We'll also link a live stream that will happen later this week, where we will do a much more in-depth tutorial of talking about WeWeb and fashion. So this is a high-level overview. And without further ado, Slavo, explain in your own words, what is WeWeb?
Thank you very much, Mike, for having me. What is WeWeb? WeWeb is a visual programming tool. It's a web application builder. I have to say right at the beginning, it is front-end only. We firmly believe in the philosophy of decoupling the front end from the back end. Both approaches, whether monolithic or decoupled, are valid, but we firmly believe they serve a different use case. Now, the use case or use cases we focus on with WeWeb are mainly what we call production grade, scalable, and secure applications. Our intentions further down the road, and we are not quite there yet, obviously, but we are taking step by step in that direction, is to become a highly viable option versus code in general for building applications of all kinds. As everybody knows, the no-code industry is growing very, very rapidly, and especially this year, 2023, was a year of maturation of these platforms. There are quite a few out there, and no-code platforms like WeWeb are very rapidly becoming, for many use cases, the preferred platform. Why? Because of the enormous speed up in iteration. And also the simplicity with which you can develop even very complex web applications, and that democratization of development, bringing in, apart from traditional developers, bringing in product managers, designers, even marketing people, that really does many things for the industry, but most of all, it speeds up the pace at which anyone can bring innovation to market, and the cost as well. So who is WeWeb for? WeWeb is built with traditional developers mindset. So traditional developers typically get to like WeWeb very, very quickly because it's aligned with their way of thinking. But at the same time, because it is visual programming, even non-developers learn it fairly quickly and become proficient in it very, very quickly. There is a learning curve, obviously. It is not something that you learn in a day or two. And I always like to say when people ask me, who can learn WeWeb, or who can become proficient in building web applications with WeWeb. So I think there are a few kind of, I wouldn't call them barriers to entry, but there are certain things that one needs to know in order to be proficient in building, especially commercial grade web applications. First, obviously, you need to understand databases. You need to understand what they are for, and how they work in general. It would be very helpful if one would understand the difference between a relational database and a document database. Definitely. Obviously, it is super important that you understand APIs, how they work, to a certain degree also how they are built. Very, very important. I think it is super important that one understands at least the basic concepts of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You do not have to be fluent in the syntax of any of these, but you need to have at least a basic understanding web design. But that's about it, really, and that's why I just had a discussion with a potential customer from San Francisco, and there are a bunch of Figma designers, and they love WeWeb because it shares the same visual approach, and so
Yeah.
they started playing with it, and they could get up to speed very quickly. So yeah, that's what WeWeb is, and that's who it is for.
Got it. So if I can paraphrase, on the one hand, existing developers or like people who are already building stuff in code can use WeWeb to just accelerate some parts of it and just iterate faster than they would be able with code. But on the other hand, you also empower, let's call them semi-technical people, right? That's a good catch-all phrase. Can be a designer who understands it, can be like maybe even like a business person who understands the basics of APIs and code and that kind of stuff. So you empower people like on the lower spectrum of technical like skill to build things that they were not able to build before. You say they need some kind of level, right? Because if you don't understand anything about the web, how do you want to build like a commercial grade web app? Because that's also a part of it. You can use WeWeb for like some fun projects, right? But the actual vision is to build, as you said, commercial grade scalable web applications. And for that, you just need to understand like some basics about how the web works or about how the front end interacts with the back end, these kind of things. And you can learn them, right? You can learn them while you're exploring WeWeb, etc. But I think that gives us a good just starting point that we have right now. So maybe you can just give us a quick tour of what WeWeb looks like. Firstly, let's focus on the front end side of things, show us what it looks like, and then we can jump into how we can connect it with FastGen.
Yes. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's loading. There we go. We can see it.
Is the resolution good enough, or should I make it larger or smaller? Is it fine?
I mean, for me, it's good enough, but I usually have good eyes. So maybe if you can zoom in one more, sometimes people complain about it.
Okay, so let's add one more click, like so.
Yeah, I think that's great. Everyone should be able to read now.
Perfect. So very quickly, this is, Mike, as you alluded to, this is exactly the very same project that your team and our team will go over in detail during the webinar. Mm-hmm. This is really one of our template. It is part of the starting kit of WeWeb, so anyone can install this template. It's a very simple CRM product. And I'm not going to go through it. Again, that will all be covered through the webinar, but I'm going to use this because this is already connected to FastGen. And I will speak very briefly to how you connect to FastGen from within WeWeb. So
yes,
few words about WeWeb in general. So WeWeb is one of these current crop of web application, web design tools. It is very similar in terms of approach. It is very similar to something like Webflow. Mm-hmm. So from when you are building UIs, you have complete design freedom from a front-end standpoint as well as from a back-end standpoint. I'll get to that later. And what I mean by complete design freedom is that you can literally design anything you want. You're not limited to any internal components that you can only style, with limits. No, you can build anything that you wish for, and you can style everything down to the last pixel. So we do offer users to get going by offering a bunch of elementary, or as I call them, atomic components that are at the very lowest level in the hierarchy, and things like divs, sections, buttons. And then using these atomic components, you can go and build more complex layouts that are really molecular. So they're combined from all the atoms, and you can just take any of the atoms or the molecules and you can grow them. Now, what is really cool about WeWeb, something that is very widely used and something we are very, very proud of, is that if, for example, you don't find the component that you need, or you really need something that is perhaps out of the ordinary a little bit, you can actually build your own components with Vue.js, and you can import them into WeWeb.
Okay.
So
that's nice.
So therefore, again, I repeat, there are no limits from a design standpoint. If you don't find anything in the kit here, or you can build it using this kit, you can code it if you know how to code, Vue.js 0 or above, and import it in it. So in terms of the layout, we have the left side of the tool where all the configuration happens. You set up your collections, you add components. Then we have the element tree, the navigator, where you see all the elements on the canvas, and the way how you build your application, you simply drag and drop components into your canvas, which is in the center. And then on the right side, we have the styling panel. That is where, again, similar like it is with Webflow or all the other modern tools of today, what this is essentially CSS. We expose properties of CSS properties through a UI. And by styling, properties here, you're essentially just tweaking the underlying CSS. Then the right side, you also have settings for each of the elements, and that is also where you define the workflows and triggers. So that's the overall layout of the tool. And again, it's not something unusual, very common with all the other platforms, but I think where the magic happens and where we do feel that we stand out from the other tools that are on the market, and that is also where this whole strategy of being able to build commercial grade scalable and secure applications come in, is there are maybe 3 or 4 pillars or themes that make WeWeb quite different to what's what is on the market. So I already talked about the design freedom, so I'm not going to talk about that anymore. You have unlimited options when it comes to designing the UI, but I will talk to the backend freedom a little bit. So basically, on the backend side, you can connect to essentially anything that has a REST API out there. We have a bunch of plugins as standard inside WeWeb, and here I'm showing the data source plugins. We don't have FastGen yet, but coming soon for the FastGen.
I'm excited about it, yeah.
That will happen. So when the FastGen plugin appears, it will be in here. It will be under data sources. As you can see today, we have the other big guys here, Zano, Supabase, Airtable, all very widely used. And then we have REST API. But I want to, again, stress that even though we have plugins, that does not mean that you can only connect to services we have plugins for. You can connect to anything that has a REST API, basically.
Yeah, so, let me jump in here real quick, because there's also something that we encounter with FastGen a lot, because in FastGen we also have integrations, right, to tools like Stripe or Slack or OpenAI. But just because we have these pre-built integrations, very similarly, it doesn't mean that you can't connect to anything else. You can literally connect to any API that you have access to, and even beyond that by using custom code in FastGen. So I think it's very similar in terms of the philosophy, where you can theoretically use the plugins, and it might save you a click or two, but ultimately you have complete freedom to connect to whatever you want. And that's very similar with WeWeb and with FastGen.
Exactly. And I will demonstrate that example specifically with FastGen. So as you have seen, we do not have an official plugin for FastGen yet. Means there is no simple, you can configure type of thing, but still connecting to FastGen is very, very easy through the REST API. So for this particular demo project that I have loaded here, we have both the authentication and FastGen configured as an authentication source and also as the data source. So for FastGen, what you guys use or what we use here is the standard, I believe this is GWT token type authentication, where FastGen generates the token, and we accept that token on the WeWeb side and work with it basically. So it is quite simple to configure authentication using another system, FastGen in this particular example. It is a industry standard auth bearer token. You just enter the endpoints here. And that's basically it. It's very, very straightforward. And the same applies for configuring FastGen as a data source. So this is done through the REST API. Basically, the way how WeWeb works with data, it connects to data through API calls and brings them in as collections. And so in this particular example, we have a bunch of collections connected, and these are all collections that come from FastGen. And we use the REST API plugin for that. They are connected in so-called dynamic mode. What that means is that the front end talks directly to FastGen. That when you publish the application, the link is direct. So WeWeb does not add any performance overhead, on top of that connection. And also, this is important from a regulation standpoint when you're building applications that require GDPR or HIPAA compliance or things of that nature. In dynamic mode, the data does not pass through WeWeb, and we do not store any data whatsoever. So that's what dynamic mode means. And then what we have here is a simple configuration of the REST API, taking the FastGen parameters into consideration. So here we have the URL of the endpoint. Then the authorization is the classic, authorization bearer token. That the token comes through the authentication I showed earlier. Then some headers, and that's basically it. And here is the data in the collection that comes in from FastGen. So it is pretty straightforward. There is no particular magic here. It's all industry standard, and you guys, Mike, on your end is all industry standard. So it's very straightforward to connect and work with that data.
Yes, now, let me recap that real quick for everyone. So basically what you do in WeWeb, you design your front end. You can use one of the templates, but let's assume you build your own front end. You can design it any way you want. You can even import Vue components that you build yourself. And then what you do to connect to FastGen is you click on plugins, and then on plugins you click on REST APIs. Then you can just insert the APIs, the endpoints of the APIs you built in FastGen. WeWeb will automatically import the data, as we mentioned, as collections. But you also said that it's a direct connection, so you won't have any compliance issues if that's relevant for you. And then lastly, the very same applies to the auth. You click on plugins, you click on authentication, you click on the auth-based, what was the name? Authentication, and then token-based auth. That was it. Thank you.
We call it token-based authentication.
Yes, exactly. Then you connect your FastGen authentication. Setting that up in FastGen, it's pre-set up for you. Should take you like 5 to 10 minutes to have it running in WeWeb. And then you can sign people up. And I just want to recap that real quick. That sounds very straightforward to me.
Yeah, it is very straightforward. And already here in this, I'm already authenticated. I'm using Quentin's account, so I'm cheating a little bit because I don't have an account in this application. But as you can see, I am already authenticated. And maybe one thing I can show you how easy it is to authenticate. So what Quentin has set up here. So he's got. So let me go first to the login page. So it's a simple login page which has a workflow attached. And so when you submit your credentials through, by pressing the login button, what will happen is on submitting the form will call this global workflow called sign up, sign in, and Q has it defined under his global workflows. That would be this one. And so what this workflow does is it makes an API request. Again, very straightforward API request. Mike, I believe these keys are your FastGen keys that are relevant to authentication. And then in the body, he just sends the email and the password. Then so that API request is sent to FastGen authentication server. FastGen authentication server sends back the token. WeWeb will then store the access token, and then it will fetch the user that is associated with that access token. And that's basically, and then the user is authenticated. So it is really very, very straightforward. And yeah, I mean, authentication, sign up, sign in is
yes. And maybe also a quick comment there. We do have a video on how to set up authentication, like step by step with WeWeb and Fashion on the YouTube channel. I'll link it in the description as well, in case you might need some additional support there. And okay, so we talked about design freedom. We talked about backend freedom. Is there any other higher level point that you would like to touch on?
Yes, there are two more things that are important and that I want to talk about. So front-end freedom, back-end freedom. The third one, very, very important, is what we call hosting freedom. With WeWeb, the default hosting environment is obviously the WeWeb deployment environment, which runs on AWS. But users also have the option to self-host applications as well.
Okay.
So you can self-host the application on the infrastructure that is yours. And what is really cool there is when you self-host an application on your own infrastructure, the way how it works is you install a open source web server that is provided to you by WeWeb, and then you export your compiled application, which is Vue.js application, and you deploy it on that web server, and it will run. You can also export the raw code if you want to. You don't deploy the raw code, you deploy the compiled application, but you also have access to the raw code as well.
Got it.
Really, really cool here, again, for those that need to build applications that need to comply with strict regulations. Once that application runs on your infrastructure, there is no connection to WeWeb at all. There is no kill switch, there is no backdoor, there is no umbilical, nothing of that nature. That application is completely self-provisioned and runs in its own environment. And coming back to what I said before, it will talk directly to your FastGen backend from your infrastructure.
Nice. And how do you sync it? Let's assume you're doing changes. Do you just push the new compiled version to your own infrastructure again?
So there are two ways how you can do that. One way is a simple export. You export the app and copy it on the server again.
Okay.
That's the default mode. But then on our enterprise plans, we offer access to what we call self-hosting API. And with that self-hosting API, you can run deployment scripts, and you can build your own little dev environment where when you hit publish up here, the application will be then automatically deployed to one or several instances wherever you want them to be deployed, even multiple domains, anything you want. It's very, very flexible. So self-hosting, Mike, is that third pillar. And fourth pillar I wanted to talk about is, I cannot avoid it, AI.
Yeah, I was waiting for it.
Yeah, we are big on AI. We love AI. I think the way how we approach AI is somewhat similar to what other companies do, in the sense that we use AI to help builders become more productive and build better. So what users have at their disposal today is two tools. So they are all under the Copilot option here. Well, you see things you should not see because I'm an admin, so I have another option here that normal users have.
We will just skip that one.
So that is import HTML. That is not available to normal users. That is only available to us because it's experimental. But I will get to that in a moment. So what we have today available is two things. Ask a question. That is a chatbot that we've been training with all the WeWeb content since February, I believe, of this year, or March, I don't remember. And so all the support issues, all the documentation, everything was loaded onto that. It is GPT-4 powered, and what it does is it answers your questions, in language and that is relevant to WeWeb, and it helps you build your application. It is very, very cool, and I highly recommend it to anyone who is starting with WeWeb. Then the second thing we have here that is AI powered is this piece here. So what it does is you can generate, and I'm not going to do anything here. I don't want to ruin Q's project. But what you can do here is you can generate no-code formulas or JavaScript formulas based on natural language input. So if you're struggling with some data conversions, or you're struggling to transform data in a certain way, you can just use the Copilot to build it for you, and it will build it in with no-code formulas or with coded formulas. And I believe Q will go through that with his with his webinar. So that's the second thing that we have there, and there are two more things that are coming.
Okay.
So the one that is going to be hugely popular, that is going to be the Figma importer.
Ooh, okay, yeah.
Will come out by the end of this year, and it will do what it says. You will be able to import initially mainly the design tokens from Figma, also your fonts, your colors, typography, all of that kind of stuff.
That will make some of the fashion people very happy, I can tell you.
Yes. So that will be in the initial release. And then over time, we'll be adding to it stuff that will hopefully bring it to a point where it will become a massive productivity booster for everyone. And the fourth thing that will come eventually, although we don't have a particular timing for that, is an HTML CSS importer, meaning that you'll be able to import any legacy HTML CSS, into. And will create your sections and
nice. Okay, got it.
Your UI based on that.
Yeah,
it's kind of in experimental phase right now, so it's not ready for a production release.
Got it. I feel you. I think you have a bit of a similar approach when it comes to AI and some of the like Copilot or assistant features. So what we do is we also roll it out basically step by step on a supportive basis, starting with like on our end the SQL, so you can like ask our Copilot to write SQL for you. Then code is next, and then like more expansive, like full flows will be the next one. So it's like basically a step-by-step, always in the sense of, as you said, supporting builders to be more productive with their time and being able to solve things faster than they would be able to solve it before. And I think it seems as if you have a similar philosophy when it comes
Absolutely. I mean, it's all about, no code is about simplicity and speed compared to traditional development. And that's what we are trying to enhance by adding the support of AI wherever the users spend a lot of time or wherever they might need a lot of help. And with specifically with the formulas, we have that is something we have identified very quickly. Building complex formulas can be quite challenging for users that are fairly new to the platform.
Yeah.
So the Copilot, and frankly, I know WeWeb quite well, and I do a lot of stuff in WeWeb, and sometimes I use the Copilot as well. It is very helpful.
I feel you. I use our SQL Copilot basically almost every time now because it's just so much faster than me writing it myself. Even if I theoretically would be able to do it, it's just faster. And if it's faster and actually helpful, why not?
Yeah. No, exactly. So those are the four main kind of areas. Just to repeat them: design freedom, backend freedom, hosting freedom, and AI.
Got it.
Four pillars that power us forward with this.
Okay, I love it. Well, maybe you like quickly close the screen share, and then we can do some closing words.
Okay.
So first of all, thank you so much for showing us around WeWeb. That has been very helpful. And it's interesting to hear or to see what it looks like, and at the same time also get an understanding of the overall philosophy, right? And if I grasp just a couple of things of what you're doing, just from my perspective, right? Because like from what you said, I think the two main things let's say the three main things that jump out to me is like, number one, I just call it freedom, right? You have the design freedom, you have the backend freedom, you have the hosting. So basically freedom is like one big part of it. And I think that's a very interesting step, because no code for a long time was always about like restriction, not by default, but just basically by like almost by accident, right? And the newer forms of new no code, low code tools, or even let's call them visual builders, because some of them don't want to be called low code tools, right? The new form, the modern tools like WeWeb, they are about modularity. And that's what we think about as well, right? Like we are a modular platform. You can connect it to any front end. WeWeb is a great fit just because you have a very similar philosophy. And on the other hand, in our case, you can use our database, but you can also connect Supabase to us if you want, because again, like we want to have a modular platform. So freedom is number one when I think about WeWeb. Number two is, let's call it speed, right? You think a lot about how can you make people faster. And that can be by, at first you just host it through WeWeb just to be super fast. You use the Copilot to build a formula for you. You have these pre-built components, the atomic components, the higher level components, sometimes even full templates. So it's about speed and iteration speed, just to like get things to market faster and like progress faster. And rate of like the rate of velocity you have is always very predictive of a successful product, right? So that's the second part that I would stress based on what you said and what I've seen. And the last part is the specific focus on scalable and you said secure web apps. And I think this is also where like a distinction comes into like some of the other tools out there that are maybe more for landing pages or like for internal tools. Like this is specifically made, at least that's how it feels to me. You can build internal tools with it, but I think the idea behind it is that you can actually use it with external users as like an actual replacement for what you usually would have done with custom code. Is that a fair summary?
Spot on. In fact, that is our theme for next year. The theme, I call it Why Code. That is the theme.
Nice.
Because next year, and we're not there yet, but we're getting there very, very quickly with what we have on our roadmap as well. But next year, we really want to have companies and individuals, developers start asking that question, why code? So we want to turn the discussion, from why should I use no-code tools to why should you code in the first place?
Yeah.
Because we are going to provide you with a tech stack consisting of a competent front end, competent back end that will allow you to build whatever you need to build order of magnitude faster and therefore cheaper because you compress the development time.
Yeah.
Although you will not compress all the other phases of product development, they still have to be there.
Sure.
The actual development you compress, and therefore the overall cost of that process is going to be much lower.
Yeah, and the opportunity cost as well, right? Because you're not only losing money, you use time to market. Time to market usually translates into like some other very helpful business metrics. So there's like more to it than just money, right?
Yeah.
Iteration speeds can be partly budget, but it's also an ROI play.
Yes.
And I think that's a very important piece of it.
And also the time to market. I mean, I don't want to, repeat, but in the era we are entering right now, the AI era, the era of commercial AI, we already see that things are happening at breathtaking speed. And so time to market is going to be even more critical than ever.
Yes, agreed. Well, that was a lovely conversation. Thank you so much for coming. Everyone who watched this, I hope you got a better understanding of what WeWeb is, how they think about it, how you can connect it with FastGen. We will link some of the more in-depth tutorials that go a bit deeper into some of the details and step-by-step things in the video description on YouTube. And you can already pre-save the live stream that we'll do on Thursday, where we'll go through the whole CRM that you just saw, explain how it was built, and give you a bit more context. But Slavo, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
It was very helpful. Have a good rest of your week. And I will definitely participate in the question, why code, next year.
Okay, thank you. Have a great day.